I gave them everything. Every single thing I had. My time, my strength, my dreams, my youth. I raised 3 children on my own after their father walked out on us when the youngest was still in diapers. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to keep food on the table and clothes on their backs. I never complained. I never asked for gratitude. I just loved them with everything I had, believing that one day, when they were grown and successful, we would finally have time to just be together, to enjoy the life I had worked so hard to build for them. My name is Margaret, though my children called me Mom when they were young, and later, when they grew busy and important, they called me less and less. I'm 73 now, and I live in the same small house where I raised Daniel, Sarah, and Michael. It's the house where I stayed up countless nights nursing fevers, helping with homework, and listening to their dreams. The walls still hold the pencil marks tracking their heights, though they haven't noticed those marks in decades. Daniel was my firstborn, serious and ambitious even as a child. He studied hard, got a scholarship to a prestigious university, and became a successful corporate lawyer. I was so proud of him. I remember the day he graduated, how he hugged me tight and said, "Mom, everything I am is because of you." Those words sustained me through many difficult years. Sarah came next, my only daughter, beautiful and brilliant. She became a doctor, a pediatrician, which seemed so fitting because she had always been gentle with smaller children when she was young. And Michael, my baby, he went into finance and made more money, by 30 than I had seen in my entire life. They all moved to different cities, chasing their careers, building their lives. I understood. I had raised them to be independent, to reach for the stars. I never wanted to be the kind of mother who held her children back with guilt or neediness. So I smiled when they left, one by one, and I told them I would be fine. And I was fine, for a while. I kept working. I took a job at the local library after I finally retired from the factory, and I kept busy with my garden and my book club and the small rhythms of life in a quiet town. The phone calls came regularly at first. Sunday evenings we had established a routine. Daniel would call at 6, Sarah at 7, Michael at 8. We would talk about their weeks, their achievements, their problems at work. I would listen, encourage, advise when asked, but slowly, imperceptibly, the calls became shorter. 6 o'clock became 6:30, then 7, then, "Mom, I'll call you back. I'm in the middle of something." The callbacks became rare, then non-existent. The Sunday calls became every other Sunday, then monthly, then whenever they happened to think of it. I tried not to keep score. I tried not to feel the growing ache in my chest, when weeks would pass without hearing their voices. I told myself they were busy, that this was natural, that I had raised them to have full, important lives. But late at night, alone in that house full of memories, I couldn't help wondering if I had somehow failed. Had I loved them too much? Not enough? Had I made myself too available, so they never learned to miss me? The invitations I extended were always met with the same responses. "Come visit for Thanksgiving." I would say, "Mom, we're going to Jennifer's parents this year, you understand." Jennifer was Daniel's wife, elegant and cold, who smiled at me with her mouth but never her eyes. "What about Christmas?" I would try with Sarah. "Mom, we're taking the kids skiing, it's already booked. Maybe next year." Next year never came. Michael stopped answering my calls altogether for months at a time, then would suddenly appear with expensive gifts and apologies, staying for an hour before rushing back to whatever urgent matter awaited him. I watched my grandchildren grow up through photographs on social media. Daniel had 2 boys, James and Christopher. Sarah had 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. Michael remained unmarried, married to his work. He joked the rare times I saw him. I sent birthday cards and Christmas presents, carefully chosen, wrapped with love. Sometimes I received thank you texts, sometimes nothing at all. I wondered if my grandchildren even knew who I was, this distant old woman who sent gifts from somewhere far away from their real lives. The years passed this way. I grew older, slower. My knees began to ache. My hands developed arthritis that made it hard to garden the way I used to. I started having trouble with my heart. Nothing serious. The doctor said, just age. Just wear and tear from a lifetime of working too hard and worrying too much. I didn't tell my children about the doctor visits. I didn't want to burden them. They had their own problems, their own lives, their important careers and families to manage. Then came the fall. It was a Tuesday in October, leaves covering my front walk in a carpet of red and gold. I had been trying to rake them, stubborn as always, refusing to admit I needed help. My foot caught on an uneven stone, and suddenly I was falling, the sky wheeling above me, and then pain, bright and sharp, shooting through my hip. I lay there on the cold ground, my phone inside on the kitchen counter, unreachable. Mrs. Henderson from next door found me 20 minutes later, called the ambulance. Fractured hip, they said at the hospital. Surgery required, 6 to 8 weeks of recovery. I called my children from the hospital bed. Daniel's phone went to voicemail. I left a message trying to keep my voice steady, not wanting to sound pathetic. Hi honey, it's Mom. I had a little fall, broke my hip. I'm at County General. They're going to do surgery tomorrow. Just wanted to let you know. Love you. Sarah answered but was with a patient. Mom, can I call you back in an hour? She didn't call back. I tried again the next day. Oh Mom, I'm so sorry, yesterday was crazy. A broken neck. Do you need anything? I told her I would be fine. That the surgery went well, that I just needed some time to recover. Do you need me to come? She asked, and I could hear the hope in her voice that I would say no. No, sweetheart, I'll manage. I told her, and I could hear her relief through the phone line. Michael finally called 3 days after the surgery. He had been in Tokyo on business and hadn't checked his messages. Jesus, Mom, why didn't you tell me it was serious? I didn't know how to answer that. How do you tell your child that you did try to tell them, but they weren't listening? It's okay, I said instead. I'm getting out of the hospital today. Mrs. Henderson is driving me home. There was a pause on the line. Are you sure you're going to be okay alone? He asked. Yes, I lied. I'm tough. You know that. The recovery was harder than I expected. Everything hurt. Getting out of bed was an ordeal. Making meals was nearly impossible. Mrs. Henderson helped when she could, bringing casseroles and checking on me daily, but she was 78 herself, with her own health problems. The visiting nurse came 3 times a week, efficient and kind, but gone in 30 minutes. The rest of the time, I was alone with my pain and my thoughts. I had a lot of time to think during those long weeks. I thought about the choices I had made, the sacrifices that had seemed so necessary and noble at the time. I had given up everything for my children. I never dated after their father left because I didn't want to confuse them or divide my attention. I never pursued my own dreams of going to college, of maybe becoming a teacher like I had once hoped, because there was never enough money or time. Every decision, every moment, every dollar had gone to them, and now, when I needed them, truly needed them, they were nowhere to be found. But I couldn't be angry. Or I tried not to be. They called occasionally, asking how I was doing. And I always said I was fine, because what else could I say? The truth would only make them feel guilty. And I didn't want to be the burden that they had to carry along with all their other responsibilities, so I lied and I healed slowly, and I learned to walk with a cane, and I adjusted to this new reality of being truly, completely alone. Christmas came. None of them came home. Daniel sent an expensive flower arrangement with a card that read, "Get well soon, Mom. Love, Daniel, Jennifer, and the boys." Sarah called on Christmas Eve, full of apologies, promising to visit in the spring. Michael sent money, as if money could fill the empty chair at my table, as if money could wrap its arms around me and tell me I mattered. I spent Christmas Day alone. Mrs. Henderson had gone to her daughter's house in Florida. I sat in my living room, looking at the small tree I had managed to put up, the lights blinking in their cheerful pattern, and I cried. I cried for the first time since the accident, great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep inside, somewhere I had kept carefully locked away for years. I cried for the young mother I had been, so full of hope and love and determination. I cried for the sacrifices that had seemed so meaningful at the time, but now felt like they had led me to this moment, alone on Christmas in a house full of ghosts. That night, something changed inside me. I realized that I had been waiting my entire life, waiting for my children to have time for me, waiting for them to remember me, waiting for my life to begin after I had finished giving them theirs. I was 73 years old, recovering from a broken hip, and I was still waiting. How much time did I have left? How many more Christmases would I spend alone, telling myself that next year would be different. I made a decision. I was done waiting. I was done making myself small and undemanding, hoping that my silence would somehow make them love me more, remember me more often. I started physical therapy with a determination I hadn't felt in years. I worked hard, pushed through the pain, regained my strength. By February, I was walking without the cane. By March, I had rejoined my book club, started volunteering at the local elementary school, helping children with reading. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected while I waited by the phone for calls that rarely came. I also made another decision. I stopped calling my children. It was an experiment at first, a curiosity to see how long it would take them to notice my absence. A week passed, 2 weeks, a month. Finally, 6 weeks after I stopped calling, Sarah called me. "Mom, is everything okay? I haven't heard from you." I told her I was fine, just busy with my own life. She sounded surprised, maybe even a little hurt. Good, I thought, let her feel a fraction of what I've felt for years. I didn't tell them what I was planning. In April, I put my house on the market. It sold within 2 weeks. A young family, pregnant with their 3rd child, fell in love with it. I looked at the joy on their faces and remembered when that house had represented hope for me too. I wished them well. With the money from the sale and my savings, I had enough to do something I had never done before. Something for myself. I bought a small cottage in a coastal town 3 hours away, a place I had visited once as a child and never forgotten. It had a view of the ocean, a garden full of wild roses, and a front porch perfect for watching sunsets. I didn't tell my children I was moving until everything was arranged. I called each of them on a Sunday evening, our old appointed time, and told them simply, "I'm moving. The house is sold." My new addresses were predictable. Shock, confusion. "Why didn't you tell us you were thinking about moving?" Daniel demanded. "You didn't ask," I replied calmly. "How are we supposed to visit you there?" Sarah wanted to know. "The same way you visited me here, which is to say not very often." There was silence on the line. Michael surprisingly laughed. "Good for you, Mom," he said, and I heard something in his voice I hadn't heard in years. Respect. I moved in May. Mrs. Henderson cried when I left, made me promise to call her every week. I promised and kept that promise, unlike my children who promised so much and delivered so little. My new life began slowly, quietly, but it began. I met my neighbors, joined a new book club, started painting classes, something I had always wanted to try. The ocean soothed something in me that had been raw for years. I woke up each morning to the sound of waves and felt, for the first time in decades, a sense of peace. My children did not visit that summer, despite vague promises. Daniel said they couldn't get away. Sarah had some excuse about the children's schedules. Michael was, as always, traveling for work. I told them it was fine, and I meant it. I had stopped expecting anything from them, and in that release of expectation came a surprising freedom. I was no longer angry. I was no longer hurt. I simply accepted what was and built my life around that reality. August brought the diagnosis I had been half expecting for months. The heart troubles had worsened. The doctors used words like congestive, deterioration, maybe a year, maybe less. I asked them to be honest, and they were. 6 months to a year if I was lucky. Less if I wasn't. I sat in the doctor's office, holding this knowledge, this ending, and I felt strangely calm. We all die. I had lived 74 years, most of them hard but some of them beautiful. I had raised 3 children who survived and thrived. I had loved deeply, even if that love had not been returned in the measure I had hoped. I had this cottage, this ocean, these final months of peace. It was enough. It had to be enough. I called my children that evening. I told them the diagnosis, the prognosis, the timeline. This time, they listened. This time, the shock in their voices was real, sharp, unfiltered by excuses or distance. "Mom," Daniel said immediately. "We'll all come," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "I'm on the next flight," Michael promised. They came, all 3 of them that weekend. Descending on my little cottage with their guilt, and their fear and their sudden, desperate need to make up for lost time. They were shocked by my cottage, by how peaceful it was, by how much life I had built without them. Daniel walked through each room slowly, as if seeing me for the first time in years. Sarah stood on my porch looking at the ocean and cried, Michael sat next to me on my couch and held my hand, something he hadn't done since he was a little boy. We talked. Really talked, maybe for the first time in decades. They apologized, each in their own way. Daniel admitted he had always been so focused on providing for his own family that he forgot where he came from, who had provided for him. Sarah confessed that she had taken me for granted, assumed I would always be there, indestructible, unchanging. Michael, my baby, cried and said he had been running from something his whole life. But he didn't know what until now. He had been running from the fear that he could never be enough, could never give back what I had given him. So he had stopped trying. I forgave them because what else could I do? They were my children. I had loved them before they were born, loved them through every mistake and triumph. But I also told them the truth. I forgive you, but I need you to understand what these years have been like. I needed you, and you weren't there. I waited for you, and you never came. I'm dying now, and yes, you're here. But I've been dying slowly of loneliness for years, and you didn't notice. I don't say this to hurt you, but because you need to know. You need to know so you don't do this to your own children, so you don't wake up one day and realize you missed the people who loved you most while you were busy with things that mattered less. They promised to stay, to spend my final months with me, to finally give me the time I had always deserved, and they tried. Daniel took a leave of absence from his firm. Sarah rearranged her practice. Michael turned down overseas assignments. They brought my grandchildren, those strangers with my DNA, and I got to know them finally. James and Christopher, serious boys like their father. Sarah's children, wild and sweet. They filled my cottage with noise and life. And it was both beautiful and bittersweet, because I kept thinking about all the years we could have had, all the memories we could have made. But here is what I learned in those final months. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting, and presence under the shadow of death is not the same as presence in the fullness of life. My children were there, yes, but their being there was shaped by guilt and urgency, and the knowledge that time was running out. It was not the natural, easy togetherness I'd dreamed of during all those years alone. It was forced, frantic, filled with the weight of regret. I saw how exhausting it was for them to suddenly rearrange their lives around me. I saw the stress on Daniel's face when his phone rang with work emergencies. I saw Sarah struggling to balance her children's needs with her desire to be present for me. I saw Michael's restlessness, how hard it was for him to just sit still, to be instead of do. They were trying, genuinely trying, but they were trying to compress decades of neglect into a few months of intensive attention, and it doesn't work that way. Love isn't something you can save up and deliver in a lump sum at the end. It's daily, small, consistent. It's phone calls on ordinary Tuesdays. It's showing up for the small moments, not just the big dramatic ones. September came and I was getting weaker. The pain was increasing. The doctors offered hospice care and I accepted. A hospital bed was set up in my living room, facing the windows so I could see the ocean. My children took turns staying with me, never leaving me alone. It should have been everything I wanted, but sometimes, in my more honest moments, I felt smothered by their attention. Where had this devotion been when I could still walk on the beach? When I could still laugh without pain? When I could still have enjoyed their company without counting down my final days? One afternoon in late September, when it was just Daniel and me, I asked him something I had wondered about for years. Daniel, do you remember when you were 8? And you got sick with pneumonia? I stayed up with you for 3 nights straight, barely sleeping, just watching you breathe, terrified you might stop. He nodded, his eyes filling with tears. I remember, Mom. I continued, I did that because I loved you, yes, but also because I couldn't imagine a world without you in it. My question is, did any of you ever feel that way about me? Could you imagine a world without me? And did that thought ever make you pick up the phone? Get on a plane, come home? He broke down completely. No, he sobbed. I couldn't imagine it, so I didn't try. I just assumed you'd always be there. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. His apology was real. His pain was real. But it didn't change the years that had passed. The loneliness that had been my constant companion. I held him while he cried. This successful, powerful man reduced to the little boy he had once been, and I felt a complicated mixture of love and sorrow, and something like pity. October arrived with its golden light. I was fading now, spending more time asleep than awake. My children read to me, played music, told me stories about their lives. My grandchildren drew pictures that covered my walls. It was beautiful, and it was too late, and both things were true at once. I had thought I wanted this. Their attention, their presence, their finally putting me first. But what I realized in my final weeks was that I didn't want to be someone's dying obligation. I wanted to have been someone's living priority. On October 15th, a Thursday afternoon with the sun streaming through my windows, and the sound of waves providing a rhythm like a heartbeat, I gathered my children around my bed. I had something I needed to say, something I had been thinking about for weeks. They sat close, holding my hands, their faces anxious and loving and so guilty. "I need you to listen carefully," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. "When I'm gone, I don't want you to feel guilty. I don't want you to torture yourselves with regret. What I want is for you to learn. Learn that the people who love you won't be here forever. Learn that careers and money and success mean nothing if you sacrifice the people who matter most. Learn that time is the only thing you can never get back, and how you spend it is how you spend your life." I looked at each of them in turn. "Daniel, your boys are growing up. Don't look up one day and realize they're strangers. Sarah, your children need you now. While they're small, while they still think you hung the moon. Don't let them learn to stop needing you because you're never there. Michael, find someone to love, build something beyond your bank account, create a life that matters in ways that have nothing to do with money." I paused, gathering my strength. "I gave you everything I had. I don't regret that. But I should have taught you better. I should have taught you that love requires presence, that family requires effort, that no one should ever be taken for granted. I taught you to be successful, but I failed to teach you to be human. That's on me as much as it's on you. So don't just mourn me, be better, do better. Make sure no one in your life ever feels the way I felt, invisible, forgotten, waiting for scraps of attention from the people they loved most." They were all crying now, making promises, swearing they would change. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to think that my death would be the catalyst for their transformation, that they would suddenly become different people who valued time with loved ones over achievement and advancement. But I knew better. People rarely change, not fundamentally. They might try harder for a while, might be more conscious, but eventually they slip back into old patterns, old priorities. Still, I had said what I needed to say. I had given them one last gift. The truth, unvarnished and clear. What they did with it was up to them. My work was done. I had raised them, taught them what I could, and now I was letting go, not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. Death is the ultimate letting go, the final release of control. The days that followed blurred together. Medication for the pain made everything soft and distant. Faces appeared and disappeared. Voices floated around me like music. I slept and woke and slept again, the boundaries between dreaming and waking growing thinner. Sometimes I was young again, holding my babies, feeling the weight of them in my arms, the pure joy of their existence. Sometimes I was in my garden, my hands in the earth, creating beauty. Sometimes I was nowhere at all, just floating in a peaceful darkness. On a Tuesday morning in late October, just as the sun was rising over the ocean, turning the water to gold, I opened my eyes one last time. My children were there, all three of them, exactly as I had once dreamed they would be, together, present, focused only on me. Daniel was holding my right hand, Sarah my left, Michael sitting close with his hand on my shoulder. I looked at each of their faces, these people I had created and raised and loved beyond reason. I wanted to tell them I loved them one more time, but I didn't have the breath. So I smiled instead, hoping they would understand everything in that smile, my love, my forgiveness, my hope for them, my acceptance of this ending. And then I closed my eyes and let the ocean sound carry me away, out with the tide, into whatever comes next. They found a letter after I died, tucked into my bedside table. I had written it weeks earlier, when I still had the strength, knowing I might not be able to say everything I needed to say at the end. In it, I told them about the cottage I had loved, the peace I had finally found, the friendships I had made in my final year. I told them I was leaving everything equally to them, not much but enough. But I also left them something else: instructions. I instructed that once a year, on my birthday, they were to gather together. All of them, with their families. No excuses, no conflicts, no putting it off. They were to spend the whole day together, no phones, no work, just being family. And they were to tell their children about me, not just the grandmother who died, but who I was. The young mother who worked 3 jobs. The woman who sacrificed everything. The person I became at the end when I finally chose myself. I wanted my grandchildren to know that people are complicated, that love is complicated. That sometimes the people who give everything are the ones who get forgotten. And that we all have a responsibility to make sure that never happens to anyone we love. The letter ended with this: I forgive you for the years you forgot me. Now you must forgive yourselves. But more importantly, you must remember me, not by visiting my grave or speaking my name on holidays, but by being present in your own lives, by showing up for the people who love you, by never making anyone else wait the way I waited. That would be the greatest tribute, the only one I truly want. Live better than I taught you. Love better than I showed you. And never, ever take for granted the people who would give you everything, because one day they'll be gone, and all you'll have left is regret and the terrible knowledge that you can never get that time back. Make different choices. Build different lives. That's my final gift to you, the chance to learn from my mistakes and yours. Don't waste it. They kept the promise. Every year on my birthday they gather. Sometimes it's at Daniel's house, sometimes Sarah's, sometimes at the cottage that they decided to keep, to maintain as a family retreat. They bring their children, and now their children are bringing their children. They tell stories about me, some true, some embellished, all of them keeping my memory alive in a way I never was alive for them during those long, lonely years. But more than that, they changed. Not overnight, not perfectly, but genuinely. Daniel leaves work at 5 now, coaches his son's soccer teams, knows his boys in ways his own father never knew him. Sarah works fewer hours, says no to obligations that take her away from her family, has dinner with her children every night. Michael met someone, married her, adopted 2 children, built the family he had always been too scared to want. They all call each other now, regularly, not out of obligation but because they genuinely want to connect. They've learned, finally, that time is the only currency that matters, and how you spend it determines everything. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the light is golden and forgiving, they think about me and feel a complicated mixture of love and grief and gratitude and regret. They remember the mother who gave them everything, who they forgot until it was almost too late, who forgave them even as she made sure they understood the cost of their neglect. They remember, and they remembering, they try to live differently. They try to be better, and in that trying, in that constant effort to be present and loving and attentive, I am with them still. Not as the ghost of their guilt, but as the voice in their heads reminding them what matters, urging them to look up from their phones, to come home, to show up, to love actively and presently, and without reservation. My cottage still stands on the coast, windows facing the endless ocean. My children visit it often, separately and together, and they say they feel me there in the peace of it, in the wild roses, in the sound of the waves. They bring their children and grandchildren, and they tell my story, not to make anyone feel guilty, but to teach what I learned too late, and they learned almost too late, that we are all given people to love, and time to love them. And what we do with those 2 gifts defines the meaning of our entire lives. Everything else is just noise, just distraction. Just ways we fool ourselves into thinking we have forever, when forever is just another word for too late.